Hey guys, back at you with lesson 2.6. Lesson 2.6 is called absolute value equations. These can be a little tricky, but I'm going to work you through some of your problems so it will be okay, and I'm going to tell you which example to refer back to. If you have not already taken the time to read pages 65, 66, 67, and 68, you're going to be pretty confused. You would save yourself really a whole lot of mental stress if you hit pause right now and read through. Because if you read through, then it's smooth sailing from this point out. But if you do not read it and you try to catch up to what I'm trying to say to you without reading it, you're just making it much more difficult on yourself. But you're teenagers, so you probably won't read it. But nonetheless, you actually should. Okay, I'm going to proceed forward as if I believe you 100% read every word on those 4 pages. And let's talk about what we need to do for our practice problems. So I'm looking at page 69, practice 2.6, and I'm going to just walk you through this lesson while giving you some answers. So we'll start with number 1. It's the absolute value of x equals 3. So what it says is solve each absolute value equation and check the solution. If there's no solution, write no solution. So what I need to do is I need to take this absolute value of x and I need to turn it into 2 different expressions. So I'm going to start looking at the example on page 66, example 2.6a. Okay, and you can read through those steps as I sort of work through the steps. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this absolute value of x and I'm going to create 2 different problems because I know that it could be that x equals 3. Or it could also be that negative x equals 3. Because remember, the absolute value is just the distance from 0. So if I was on a number line, and I'm talking about the distance from 0, I could say 1, 2, 3 positive. Or I could say 1, 2, 3 negative. Okay, so it's okay. Like, it's the distance from 0. So it could be a negative number, it could be a positive number. Okay? So here, this one's already solved for me, easy peasy. This one I have basically this invisible 1, so it says negative 1x equals 3. So I need to divide by the negative 1 to get this x all by itself. You always want x by itself. You don't even want it to be a negative number. They're going to cancel. It's going to leave x equals, now a positive 3 divided by a negative 1 is going to be a negative 3. So x equals negative 3. So my final answer for 1 is x equals 3 and x equals negative 3. If you're super fancy and you want to write it like this, x equals plus or negative 3, you can do that. Okay, that's kind of the fancy way of showing it. Okay, easy enough. But it wants us to check it. Okay, it does want us to check it. So how am I going to check? I'm going to go back to my original problem, absolute value of x equals 3. And I'm going to put this first one into it. So 3, absolute value of 3 equals 3. So this is 3 equals 3. Boom, that works out. And then what if I put the negative 3 into it? So the absolute value of negative 3 equals 3. Well, we know the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. And so since 3 equals 3 again, boom, I'm good. That's how you do number 1. Okay, if you're looking at these problems, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they're all kind of the same. They're similar. Hint, hint, if it's no solution, write no solution, okay? So you can hit pause and you can go ahead and do those problems by yourself, and I will come back and meet you at problem number 7. Okay, I am on problem number 7. It's just slightly more complicated now, so let's talk about what it means. It's the absolute value of this expression, x plus 1 equals 4. Okay, so I'm going to look back into my examples, and you will see that this one is very similar to page 67, example 2.6b. So the way I do this is, remember, either this thing inside this absolute value is positive or this thing inside this absolute value is negative. So I'll just start off with a positive one. It's totally easy. Here's my expression. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and solve this. You should be an expert at this now after doing your review on the last lesson. Minus 1 from both sides. That cancels. That leaves x equals 3. So I believe 3 is a possible answer. And if I want to go ahead and check it, I can just ride this boat all the way out to checking land. And 3 plus 1, absolute value. And the absolute value of 3 plus 1 is the absolute value of 4. A equals 4. And I know the absolute value of 4, don't look like a 14, is 4. And so this one is going to check out. That is correct. Okay, so I did the positive side. Okay, this was the positive side of my absolute value. Now I need to do the negative side. And so what I do is I just say x plus 1. It was my absolute value phrase. I need to keep it all together, so I'm going to put a negative sign outside of the parentheses, equals 4. Now I just need to see what I do. Okay, remember, this is like saying a negative 1 here. So I basically have negative 1 times the expression of x plus 1. So I'm going to need to distribute. So I end up with a negative x. And then a negative 1 plus a positive 1 is going to be a negative 1 equals 4. Well, I want to get x by itself. So I'm going to have to add this 1 back to both sides so that the 1's will cancel. This leaves me with a negative x equals 4 plus 1 is 5. Oh, sorry, it's an ugly 5, but it is a 5. Now remember, this is like having a negative 1 here. So I want to divide by this negative 1. Divide by a negative 1. These are going to cancel. So x is going to equal a positive 5 divided by a negative 1. It's going to be a negative 5. And I need to check it by putting negative 5 in for x in my original problem. So here's my original problem. I'm just going to put a negative 5 in for my x. So a negative 5 plus 1 is going to be a negative 4, absolute value. And the absolute value of a negative 4 is a 4. So that indeed is true. So my answer for number 7 is x equals 3 and x equals negative 5. And that is how you do number 7. Okay, so if I flip back to my pages, I'm just looking 7 and 8. That's pretty similar. Okay, it's kind of the same way. I'll go ahead and do number 9 for you. So once you pause me, do 8, come back, and we'll do 9 together. Okay, I'm back with number 9. 2x with absolute value around it equals 1. So I'm going to make my positive side first. So I'm just going to pull out the positive number, 2x equals 1. I've got to get x by itself, so I'm going to divide by 2. So that means x equals 1/2. I can go ahead and check it. Oh, sorry, that's an ugly 1/2. I can go ahead and check it by just saying 2 times 1/2, absolute value, equals 1. And 2 times 1/2 is 1. Absolute value equals 1. So 1 equals 1. So they check. Good. So I know that one of my answers is x equal 1/2. Now I've got to do the negative side. So I put my 2x, go ahead and put it in parentheses so you keep it together. And there's my negative equals 1. I can't distribute here because it doesn't say 2x plus something. Okay. I'm just literally going to multiply this negative 1 by this 2x. So that ends up with a negative 2x still equals 1. So now I need to get the x by itself. So I'm going to divide by a negative 2, divide by a negative 2. So I end up with x equals negative 1/2. So I could check it by putting it back into my original equation. So I'm going to say 2 times a negative 1/2. Put my absolute value around that. Equals 1. Now 2 times a half is 1, and a negative and a positive is a negative. I put my absolute value sign around it, which is 1 equals 1. So my answers are x equals 1/2 and x equals a negative 1/2. If you want to write it fancy, you could put it like this. We can do this only when the numbers are exactly the same. This says positive or negative 1/2, and this is number 9. Okay, number 9. So if you look at the problem, you can kind of see that 10 is like that. Let's do number 11 together. So you can go ahead and do 10 by yourself, hit pause, and come back, and we'll go over number 11 together. Okay, number 11 says 7x plus 1 inside the absolute value equals a negative 12. And this is going to be like the last one I'm going to do for you, okay? The rest of them you should be able to solve. If like a problem has something outside of this, like a plus 6 or something, you got to get rid of that 6 first. So looking ahead at problems like 27, for example, you need to move that minus 3 over before you continue on. It's okay if you have problems, we'll just keep trucking away, okay? So I have to do the positive side of this and then the negative side of this. So the positive side is going to be 7x plus 1 equals a negative 12. I'm going to get rid of the 1. I'm going to get it the 7x by itself. So I'm going to minus 1, minus 1. That's going to leave me a 7x equals negative 13. Okay? Now I'm going to divide by 7 because I want to get this all cleared out by itself. I don't want to have this mess here. So I'm going to end up with x equals negative 13 sevenths. Okay, so I need to check it and see if this works. So I'm going to just put 13 sevenths in for this x. 7 times a negative 13 sevenths plus 1 equals a negative 12. So if you remember, I have to do my multiplication before my addition. So this is like saying 7 over 1, and that's going to cancel and cancel. So that's going to leave me a negative 13 plus 1 inside my absolute value equals a negative 12. So negative 13 plus 1 is a negative 12 with the absolute value, and this is a negative 12. The absolute value of negative 12 is 12. So 12 equals a negative 12. No, that's not true. So my positive side of this doesn't work. So what is the answer? The answer is no solution for at least this positive side. Okay, so now I'm going to delete some stuff. I'm going to use my big eraser and erase some stuff. And now I'm going to try the negative side of all this business and see if this gets me an answer or if it's also a no solution. So taking the positive absolute value didn't work. It's just the answer is no solution. It just kind of is what it is. So now let's do this, 7x plus 1 with the negative side of it. Let's see if it makes any difference. So remember, this is like a negative 1 out here. So since there's a plus sign in the middle of this, I can distribute. So a negative 1 times a 7x is a negative 7x. And a negative 1 times a positive 1 is a negative 1 equals negative 12. Okay, I'm going to get rid of the negative 1, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides. Slow down, hit pause if you need to. This is going to be a negative 7x equals negative 11 because a negative 12 plus a positive 1 is a negative 11. Divide by a negative 7 because I want x by itself, and that's going to give me x equals a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so 11 over 7. So now let's check it, see if this is a solution. So I have 7x, and for x I think it's 11 over 7. We say that's multiply because anytime the x is right next to the number, it's multiply. Plus 1 equals a negative 12. And you see I kept those absolute value signs. Okay, this is like saying 7 over 1. So boom, those dudes cancel. So it says 11 plus 1 in absolute value equals a negative 12. 11 plus 1 is 12. Keep that absolute value until I'm all the way finished with it. And the absolute value of 12 is 12 equals negative 12. It doesn't work. So it's straight up no solution for the whole business. But you did get to see me solve a no solution problem, and you were able to see the way I did the math. So you should be smooth sailing, okay? Smooth sailing from here through the end of the practice for problems 2.6. Definitely check your assignment and see which problems I assigned for you. And then the review for 2.6, you'll have 1, 2, 5, and 6 as your review problems. Okay, guys, just keep trucking along. I have faith in all of us and our ability to solve these problems. If you're having problems, please email me or text me and tell me, hey, I need you to go over something with me. If you're in the middle of working a problem and you're stuck, take a picture of it, shoot me a text message or an email and say, I need your help. I need you to finish working this problem with me or tell me what to do next. Definitely don't give me your answers with a question mark when they're due at the end of the week. Try to ask me before it's actually due. See you later, taters.